Hello and welcome. Our names are Silke Caparelli and Elaine Neugebauer, and we work as educational consultants within Pennsylvania's Training and Technical Assistance Network. We serve as contributing team members to Pennsylvania's multi-tiered System of Support, MTSS, initiative, and we'll be talking with you today about the implementation science as it relates to sustaining comprehensive school improvement processes and outcomes.
PATN's mission. The mission of the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, PATN, is to support the efforts and initiatives of the Bureau of Special Education and to build the capacity of local educational agencies to serve students who receive special education services. PDE's commitment to least restrictive environment, or LRE. Our goal for each child is to ensure individualized education program, IEP, teams begin with the general education setting with the use of supplementary aids and services before considering a more restrictive environment. As a brief review, Pennsylvania's multi-tiered system of support is a standards-aligned, comprehensive school improvement framework for enhancing both academic and behavioral health outcomes for all students. In Pennsylvania, response to intervention, or RTI, refers to the methodology that is used to determine how low is low and how slow is slow as an alternative to the ability achievement discrepancy within the specific learning disability, or SLD, determination process. Pennsylvania's MTSS model represents an integrated system, meaning that cross-disciplinary teams use a problem-solving process to facilitate shared ownership for achieving academic and behavioral goals using a continuum of evidence-based practices and reliable and valid data sources. The academic side of MTSS, standards-aligned, high-quality core literacy, mathematics, and STEM instruction is delivered within the context of culturally responsive practices, positive behavioral supports, and family engagement. These are the key components that form the foundation of Pennsylvania's MTSS framework. When a well-articulated, well-designed tiered system is in place, schools are more likely to realize efficient, effective, and sustainable outcomes. During today's session, we would like to review the highlights of the implementation science with you. Specifically, what has been learned about the importance of the implementation drivers, teams, stages, and cycles within the continuous school improvement process. We would also like to keep connecting the implementation science with your efforts to maintain and sustain an effective tiered system of support, and allow time today for you to reflect on where you are in those efforts. Part of the challenge of institutionalizing anything, including a tiered system of support, is that most initiatives tend to have a shelf life of about 2 to 3 years. And during that time period, the tendency is to focus on the what rather than the how. Teams do have to counterbalance the what with the how by concentrating on some of the following issues. Number 1, how are we defining, implementing, and monitoring fidelity of implementation of our tiered system? Number 2, have we identified indicators that tell us whether our efforts and model are working? And number 3, how do we monitor those indicators, who monitors them, and how often? What the implementation science has told us is that in order for schools to realize sustainable practices and outcomes, we have to be purposeful about diffusing and disseminating information, and intentional about implementing sound information. We have to spread ideas, champion empirically supported ones, and then enact them in context with fidelity. Establishing a multi-tiered system of support helps teams accomplish diffusion, dissemination, and implementation of evidence-based practices to enhance outcomes for all students. The practices within MTSS are purposeful, measurable, and visible. In terms of each of those issues, the research associated with comprehensive school reform suggests that there are 7 critical components that all schools need to attend to and consistently refine. They are leadership, vision, and culture, infrastructure, resources, implementation, professional learning, and incentives. With respect to implementation, the National Implementation Research Network, or NIRN, and the National Association of State Directors of Special Education, or NASD, have highlighted related and complementary processes that lead to sustainable practices and outcomes. On the left, Fixon and the colleagues at NIRN have extensively researched the stages of implementation that we all experience no matter the initiative. So, for example, we have many schools in Pennsylvania that are beyond exploring MTSS and are in the initial implementation stage. Other schools have sustained full implementation for many years and are experiencing desired outcomes year after year. NIRN also has helped us to understand that these stages are not linear. For example, your school may be in the initial stages of integrating behavioral data and evidence-based practices, even though they may have reached full implementation with respect to literacy practices and outcomes. On the right, NASD has highlighted that before a school can progress through the stages of implementation, there must be a sound infrastructure and that consensus building will be needed from beginning to end in order to reach sustainable practices and outcomes. In fact, NASD would argue that schools should not attempt implementation without consensus and infrastructure. Think about your model now and where you are with respect to consensus building, infrastructure, and stages of implementation. We are going to take you directly to the implementation science so that you can plan for sustainable school improvement outcomes via a tiered system from the get-go. Take a moment on your browser and Google the Active Implementation Hub. This is what you should see. The Active Implementation Hub resources are, you guessed it, for active implementers who want their efforts to be successful. The 7 modules that you see here have been used with our teams in Pennsylvania to revisit and refine critical areas that need constant attention: leadership, vision, infrastructure, implementation, professional learning, culture, etc. Each training module allows teams to target a particular area. So, for example, you will find that Module 3, Implementation Teams, is a module devoted to team composition, prerequisite skills needed by team members, the practice of implementation teams, and invaluable tools that teams may use to advance their teaming and effectiveness. Let's take a look at some of the highlights in Modules 2 through 5 regarding implementation drivers, teams, stages, and cycles. When implementing a multi-tiered system of support, there are 3 key drivers: competency, organization, and leadership. Schools will have to develop, improve, and sustain their MTSS framework using competency drivers. For example, coaching is a service and support that may be used to facilitate competency and capacity building throughout a school. Schools will need to establish structures and supports throughout the system that are self-sustaining, such as a universally accessible and comprehensive K-12 data system. These are called organization drivers. Finally, schools will have to use different leadership skills and behaviors to accomplish different things. Both transactional and transformational leadership skills will be needed to facilitate short-term and sustainable change. These are called leadership drivers.
When competency, leadership, and organization drivers are each cultivated during MTSS implementation, these drivers become mutually reinforcing over time and lead to consistent and uniform implementation practices throughout a given school. If you're not sure where to start and you feel like you could use a compass, your team might consider using this Active Implementation Hub tool to assess what you have in place and what you may want to prioritize moving forward with MTSS implementation. Implementation teams are an important part of sustainable MTSS outcomes. In fact, implementation team conjures up skill and will, including content expertise, knowledge and experience with instructional match and implementation of evidence-based practices, and capacity building within and across the system. This is an example of layered teaming within a state to include state-level supports like Patton, regional-level supports like your intermediate unit, your district-level school improvement team, and finally, your building-level school improvement team. All levels of teams are supporting some aspect of implementation related to tiered systems of support. We referenced the stages of implementation earlier: exploration, installation, and initial and full implementation. The Active Implementation Hub has designed a tool that allows you to assess which stage you are in based upon predictable look-fors associated with each stage in an effort to build on current strengths and inform next steps. This tool also provides teams with recommended activities to facilitate improved implementation outcomes aligned with each stage. Let's turn to improvement cycles. Recall that the plan, do, study, act cycle is consistent with the essence of tiered systems. Multi-tiered systems utilize the problem-solving process or improvement cycles at every level of the system: Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. The heart of problem solving is the use of an experimental approach to implementation using data and evidence-based practices matched to student needs. The plan phase refers to interpreting data to inform student needs and those practices that are most closely matched to need at that point in time. The do phase refers to adopting and implementing evidence-based practices in real time with real kids in real settings. The study phase refers to monitoring student response. Did we implement practices with fidelity, and are students responding positively to our efforts? Are we closing gaps and advancing students academically and or behaviorally at Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, and as a system? Are more students reaching proficiency as a function of improving the quality or core instruction and school climate? Finally, the act phase refers to saying yes or no to the study phase and making appropriate changes and or sustaining our efforts if the outcomes were positive. Before we conclude, check this out. The Hexagon Tool is a way to systematically evaluate your research to practice efforts using the implementation science, everything we just talked about today, as a guiding force and foundation. When teams use this tool, they evaluate their adoption and implementation of a tiered system of support relative to need, capacity, evidence, resources, fit, and readiness on a regular basis to inform both short and long-term decision-making. We would like to leave you with a few quotes that pertain to the implementation science. If you are not quite where you want to be with respect to MTSS implementation and sustainable practices and outcomes, remember these and use the Active Implementation Hub resources. They were designed to help you keep working through expected barriers and caveats toward your desired goals. When 50% of the staff are using the innovation fully and effectively, it is legitimate to anticipate robust recipient outcomes. Once full implementation is achieved, new ways of providing services are now the standard ways of work. Implementation is not an event, it is a mission-oriented process. Practitioners who are persistent on all levels are key. Thank you for doing what you do and for joining us today. Please visit the patent website and the MTSS Educational Initiative for access to additional high-quality tools and resources, as well as the National Center for Intensive Intervention.